Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome to Men's Mental Health Night, hashtag Lift, Laugh, Love. We are here with a great group of therapists who are going to set us straight on the world of mental health. I thought we'd start off, Patrick, this was like a month ago that you and I kind of got into it on X about how much of a role smartphones / social media, how much of an effect that has on our mental health. And I said, let's save this for the podcast. So I think you're kind of like quoting these studies and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, correlation does not equal causation. And to me, it's like, okay, I get that there's some like studies that are ambiguous, could go either way. To me, it's like, I can see this with my own eyes, the effect that smartphones and social media has on people and on myself. So I'd like to flesh that out a little bit.
Well, yeah. So I guess it depends upon where you want to start, So question one is, can people problematically use their smartphone? Of course they can. Everyone can problematically use anything. So the question is not specifically, are smartphones perfect or terrible? The question is, in what ways are smartphones particularly problematic? And so there's two lines of research that I think are really worth everyone considering, right? Because this is not something that I'm making up. It's not just an opinion. It's just, this is something you can go research and take a look at and see if I'm, saying it correctly, basically. So fact number one is almost all of these self-report measures that are being used are flimsy at best, right? They don't have great construct validity at all, to be all research methods about it. And they also don't have great reliability. And so just to speak to the construct validity piece real quick, one of my favorite papers that was ever written was written during the pandemic. And I'm a professor, so I can't help but talk about scientific papers. So there was a paper that was written during the pandemic that talked about having an offline friend addiction. OFA. And you can look this paper up. It exists. You can Google Scholar it super quick and find it super quick. Friend addiction questionnaire. And what they found was that over 60% of people who responded to their friend addiction measure had a friend addiction. And so what that leads me to believe is that the entire world is wildly codependent and has no good boundaries whatsoever. Now, if that's not true, that 60% of people have some pathological relationship with their friends that's enmeshed and intoxicating and withdrawal inducing, then what that leads us to believe is that a lot of these self-report measures are absolute garbage. And you're trying to apply a word like addiction specifically, in this case, to something that can't possibly function the same way neurologically. So that's point number one. I don't know if you want to respond to that or you want me to keep rambling, because I'm a professor. I can talk all fucking night and none of you will get a word in edgewise.
Talk of gamification, because I used to work for Amazon Web Services, and specifically, purposely, we wanted to make our stuff as addictive as possible. Facebook and Google were the same way. It was to short circuit dopamine and make people basically give their information and their time. That was the money. That was the spend.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm not saying you're wrong or anything like that. What I'm saying is that people are using the word addiction incorrectly in every way, shape, and form, because all sorts of natural things cause a dopamine spike, including food, sex, and other things like that. And no one serious thinks those things are actually addicting, but you can have a problematic relationship with food and a problematic relationship with sex.
I would like to push back on your definition of addiction, because as I understand it, it's very rooted in like the euphoria aspect, I think. Is that no? Can you give us a definition of addiction?
So the straightforward model of addiction that's easy for everyone to look up is it's a pathological dependence, intoxication, withdrawal syndrome. And then for drugs in particular, it's coupled with a psychological dependence. And so just because something is reinforcing doesn't mean you're dependent upon it. Because when you're truly dependent in the old school, like addiction medicine version of dependence, there's actual withdrawals, and nobody goes through physical or psychological withdrawals from anything.
But cocaine doesn't have any physical withdrawals either.
Absolutely it does. 100% it does. Irritability, low mood,
that's psychological.
body aches, blood pressure changes. These are all real physical withdrawals from cocaine. You have withdrawals from caffeine specifically as well. So all substances, all actual drugs, chemical things or natural things, produce withdrawals if they're taken in excess, etc. But phones, porn, sex. Now, the only one that's kind of debatable is food. There's a great paper from Nora Volkow that talks about food and that circuitry related to addiction but like even that's speculative. That's still up in the air and not decided upon. So what I have a problem with is we're creating a model of problematic behavior and we're putting a word on it as a placeholder. And so compulsive phone use might happen. Problematic phone use absolutely happens. 100%. Compulsive pornography absolutely happens. Problematic pornography use, that's not compulsive, also happens. But calling it addiction is absolutely silly because you're trying to kind of give it the same psychological and physiological properties as like meth and heroin and things like that. And it just doesn't work like that in the brain or psychologically.
I think if I could push back on that, I think another way to, I mean, you have like a very specific way of understanding addiction, but I don't know that everyone would define it exactly like that. And I think one way of looking at addiction is, you know, if there's something that I really want to not do anymore and I still continue to do it.
That's compulsion. That's OCD. No one in their right mind would call OCD an addiction. And they have a compulsion they can't stop doing. So addiction, let's be clear about this. Addiction includes an obsessive process, a compulsive process, but it also includes intoxication and withdrawal. And it also includes a third thing, in addition to intoxication and withdrawal, it includes psychological dependence, where you believe you have some relational needs getting met by the experience. And no one believes they're getting their relational needs met by porn or anything else like that.
No one believes that?
No. They have relationships on the device, but they don't have. So there's this really interesting research that was done on substance addiction, and it looks at this part of the brain called the right orbital frontal cortex, right behind your right eye. And what's clear is that drugs of abuse hyperactivate dopamine in this part of your brain because your brain's trying to predict what is going to make me feel safe and alert and oriented towards what's going to keep me alive, which is lit up like a Christmas tree when you're in infancy trying to attach to your mom or your dad. And so all addictions of a substance relation hyperactivate this right orbital frontal cortex. And the same is not true for porn and sex and all these things. Sex kind of does. We can't do a lot of that research. Porn minimally does, but meth and heroin, all these things light it up like a Christmas tree, like you're staring at an attachment figure. And so if these other things had like that piece to it, I would change my mind and be on board with you and the SLA people and all that stuff. But we're not there because it's a different kind of stimulus compared to meth. And all these substances are being used for a specific psychological purpose where people are not using porn and sex for the exact same reasons. Right? No one's fulfilling an internal spiritual maladjustment with Twitter. No one.
I mean, I feel like you're being very selective about how you define addiction, though.
Isn't that what professors do? We pick a specific definitions for a specific problem? Isn't that what you do as a scientist?
This is getting. This is we have some ghost pepper in this. I should have brought some spicy popcorn. I did not know that we were going to do the spicy popcorn show today.
So here's the problem scientifically with picking an overly broad definition. There's two problems, practically speaking. As men, we understand practical problems. So two problems. Problem number one, when we have an overly broad definition, people who shouldn't be included are included. We can all agree about that, right? That's a problem. We should never treat someone for depression when they don't have depression, right? But problem number two, which is even more insidious and pervasive, is when we use a similar but different term that's wrong, that's incorrect technically, we will treat it the wrong way. And that is my bigger concern. Because if you try to treat obsessive compulsive disorder with AA, good luck. It's probably not going to work so well. You're probably not going to be able to have a higher power conversation and do a fourth step and a 10th step, and your pathological hand washing is going to disappear. I just don't believe that's going to happen. So likewise, what I'm very concerned about from an ethics perspective, not just like I want to be right, but also like, are we going to treat it the wrong way? And I think that's what's happening. I think one of the reasons why SLA and similar things are a wild failure compared to AA in particular is they're not addressing the correct thing specifically. Like, I think Pat Carnes has it correct. A lot of these sexual compulsives have a lot of trauma and attachment issues, and AA has nothing to do with trauma and attachment issues
Let me jump
whatsoever.
in there just for a second, just to say, for those of you who don't know in the listening audience, Ryan and Patrick both work a significant amount of time and have a lot of background in addiction, substance use treatment recovery. And Patrick, would you define SLA for me? Because that's not a term I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so of the various AA type groups, there are different groups for different problems, so there are organizations like AA, which are specifically for alcoholics, and NA for Narcotics Anonymous and things like that. And then for the so-called process addictions, which I would call compulsions, there are support groups like SLAs, such as Sex and Love Addiction Anonymous. And those groups have just the worst success rates compared to AA or NA. That's what I was saying.
Okay, I find that very interesting. Hang on, I have someone else I can ask though. We're gonna ask Rufus.
What is this?
What is that?
It's an alligator.
Wait, Rufus says you're both nerds.
Got him.
Got
Wow.
it.
All right. Well,
we were talking on X earlier about what guns are we going to bring to the podcast tonight, and I was like, I'm going to bring a curveball, and so I brought Rufus with me. I'll tell about Rufus in a minute, but I was just like, that's a great way to work him in. So
This is Texas, so you're allowed to have an assault alligator.
assault alligator, yes, he defends the property when I'm not here.
with no permit, by the way, no background check, no waiting period.
Concealed carry.
Yep.
Here, I want to toss out something. We don't have to stay on this the whole night. But my background is like chemical addiction. Personally, recovered from chemical addiction, and then I've worked in that industry for a long time. But I've, more recently, the last couple of years, began working with and mentoring men that have like sex and porn addiction. With porn addiction specifically, I see so much overlap. Like I'll talk to guys who they're pursuing euphoria. There's these kind of underlying issues, relational issues that they're trying to cover over. They describe withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, racing thoughts, all this kind of stuff. It's interfering with their life. It's kind of like in AA, they talk about physical allergy. I take a drink and I can't stop drinking. I start looking at porn. I'm up all night for 13 hours and I miss work. Levels of distress, levels of compulsion, like all that stuff. Like, I get that they're different. It's different than snorting cocaine, but it seems similar enough that you could reasonably put them in the same category.
Yeah, I think there are very rare exceptions where people are overboard in the 13 hours a night kind of thing. And again, it's just one of those things to me where, practically speaking, if you can treat it differently, right? Like if you're a real addict, it's different than if you're just a substance abuser, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference, right? And we all know it. And I think that's the problem I have with so-called porn addiction and sex addiction. It's like, for the most part, these people are what we would call in the drug world substance abusers. They are misusing. You could be a binge drinker and have horrific consequences of drinking alcohol and not be an alcoholic. You can be that prototypical frat boy who gets alcohol poisoning 3 times a year, and no one in their right mind typically thinks that kid's an alcoholic because it's like, it's not unmanageable. It's stupid and consequential, but there's a difference between being spiritually unmanageable and, being stupid and young and not having to adjust to real life circumstances. If real life circumstances take you away from alcohol like that, then you're not an alcoholic, right? And so that's the same thing that's true from like porn and sex addiction. It's like most of these people, especially if you read like the Pat Carnes variety of things, if you could just do some trauma work and work on some shame and stuff and some internalized religious shame around sex and sexual needs, and if it goes away like that, that's pretty drastic. That's not AA. That's not a real addiction. That's like good old trauma therapy, which a lot of folks with compulsive sex and compulsive porn have a bunch of shame and a bunch of trauma. If you can do some good praying and the obsession starts to go away, probably not addiction.
So
You know?
here's how like I would compare it, because I think it's helpful to try is best, because these are different things, but I think it's helpful to try to have an apples to apples comparison. And I was talking to Jonathan earlier about like addiction stuff. And you know, if you look at like alcoholism, for instance, about 70% of people have virtually no issues with alcohol, no addiction
Correct.
issues, no you know, problems caused in their life. About 20% of people are going to have some mild problems with alcohol, and about
Correct.
10% of people roughly are going to be alcoholics. And you know, you could have different percentages for different drugs or different activities, but you're going to have like a similar type of thing where some people can pick up porn and like not have any life consequences, and other people it's going to wreck them. Does that make sense?
I would say that the framework you're using makes sense. It still doesn't track to me that it's a highly treatable condition that doesn't require
I think
any,
treatable is a different question, though.
but alcoholism is not treatable. It's manageable.
What's the
You
difference?
don't treat alcoholism, you manage it through a higher power relationship one day at a time. There's no treatment whatsoever. It's not a curable condition. But if you can absolutely get rid of shame-driven obsessions related to sex and sexual needs and intimacy and trauma, then that's not the same thing. God, if I could just work in Rehabistan and teach people how to deal with shame, and the shame, if we just manage the shame and the trauma, and all of a sudden the obsessive desire to compulsively do this thing disappeared, that would be awesome. It'd be so easy to treat people we call alcoholics. But it's Pat Carnes in his research, the original like big sex addiction guy, says high success rates by just dealing with shame and just dealing with trauma and attachment issues. That's worlds apart different.
Yeah, go I think, did you have some, Jonathan?
I was just gonna toss out there that I was gonna go to some different therapy, speak about what Patrick just said, which is in cases of like say porn use that he was talking about, or porn addiction, if you want to call it that, there is some kind of underlying concern or condition that's permanently resolvable, that you can work toward remission. And with alcoholism, out in true addictions, as Patrick put it, you have to do some constant, like continual top-down management, some kind of skills or disciplines that would enable you to not succumb to a negative behavioral pattern around the addiction ongoing. Is that a fair kind of restatement of your words?
Yeah, that's what I'm shooting for. And speaking of management, look who showed up.
The manager.
Shit.
This is going to be a test. I don't know if you can you hear me?
Yeah.
sounds good.
Just fine.
Nice.
Look at
Nice.
Hey, wait.
so Doc. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
What happened?
Hey, Jake. Rufus says he can hear you.
Rufus. Well, I probably should ask what that's about, but we now have 3 dogs in our family. If you could see that.
Nice.
Sweet.
Oh, that's awesome.
The German Shepherd looking one is the new one we just picked.
Ah.
Cool. Congrats.
Most
We got
welcome.
we got spirit animal guides since we last talked, man. Well, so Dr. Lockwood, why don't we start a fight? What?
I love it.
Why
I love it.
Wait,
is
the people's therapist is never controversial.
Yes. Props.
okay?
We have
Okay.
props.
Why is SLA wrong? Why would they choose to be wrong?
Why would they choose to be wrong?
Yes, sir.
Oh my God! Did you just call me sir? Holy shit!
I put that on and I say something absurd, and they love it.
I think sir could be the most offensive thing you could possibly say at this point.
Yes.
Whoa, put that away. What is that?
Oh, whoa, Jake. I thought you
Not
were
that kind of fight, man.
I thought you were the adult in this room.
I thought you
was
were adult,
told-
Jake.
I thought he was the adult Jake. Okay.
I got all kinds of produce here. I got a bucket of apples too.
Oh, amazing.
Bucket of apples.
Jacob, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. So why would SLA? What you said, it makes sense, right? It seems like there's some brain scanning research going on that the sexual addiction doesn't light up the same pathways, or at least with porn, as does alcohol or meth or anything else. So why
Yeah.
would they go down the incorrect route? And I want to go on that because amongst kind of conservatarian, libertarian, conservative population, there's a lot of distrust right now for national institutions. It's like, what
Yeah.
is everybody doing?
Yeah, I share everyone's distrust of institutions, if not doubly so, because I'm part of a university. So I just see how stupid institutions are up close and personal as a professor multiple times a week. My general rebuttal to the libertarian perspective on this is I think everyone should try anything. And if you go to a church group that helps you with your sexual compulsion, if you go to an SLA that helps you, God bless. And that's awesome. And I'm glad that it's helping you. And I have zero problem with that. I still have a technical problem with the approach. But as we all know, a lot of people that don't even really need therapy can come to therapy and get help. I've had this conversation with Ed online for the last couple of weeks, and it's been super fun.
You're
And
not
so,
the
like,
only one who's had that conversation with Ed for the last couple of weeks.
I know. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying. But, my belief is that these groups can help because everyone needs healthier relationships. Everybody, all of us could benefit from mutual support or a church group or both. And my genuine belief is that SLA doesn't work because it's trying to provide a spiritual solution to, in a technical sense, a non-spiritual problem, right? Like, these people are technically not making porn and sex their higher power in the same way that an alcoholic does, in my opinion.
It seems like there's a lot of similarities in what we see as the addictive part. There's this obsession and compulsion driven by A, euphoria, kind of a positive reinforcement, B, negative reinforcement, all the icky feelings I don't like anxiety, I make them go away with this activity. It's the treatment part. It's the solution that's different. That you're kind of, is that right?
I still disagree with the negative reinforcement because these people that are reporting feeling anxiety and depression and shame after they use porn, that is all psychosocial and usually religious in nature because they don't want to accept their sexual interest. Like, some of these people are just more hypersexual, for instance, and there's nothing wrong with that because some of us are just built differently. That's statistically on the normal curve somewhere. So these people can't accept that about themselves because they have shame-driven religious notions, like hardcore, pathological Christian notions, if that makes sense. And so
I would
because they've
even say,
internalized a
Patrick,
lot of shame, if you remove that, and all of a sudden they have a more reasonable relationship with God that's not shame-fueled and that's not power-fueled, then all of a sudden the compulsive behavior disappears and the anxiety after jerking off or the fear after trying to flirt with someone, it goes away. Which is different than addiction, if that makes sense. And
can
Does it
I
though?
offer?
yes,
Let's. Well,
yes, I have
let me throw
I have
something out.
15 years of experience. For
No,
sure.
I wanted to ask
I
about
know, but other
the
people have
religious part.
experience too.
Go ahead.
Take these young
Your
women.
experience is invalid, though.
Right, noted. What of these, particularly modern promiscuity, I've read, I've seen harmful to young women. It appears that kind of the anonymous sex culture is harder for young women to deal with in
Really?
terms of their overall mental health and happiness over time than a more respectful, coherent relationship. Now, I know a lot. What's that?
What is that based on exactly? Is it a survey or something? Or
Quite a few studies that I've read.
There's a lot.
Obviously don't have them here. Don't Reddit me, bro. I don't have the studies right here in front of me.
I'm just curious.
I know.
I'm just curious.
But it's a lot. Some, not all. Some promiscuity can come out of a traumatic background, like a sexual impropriety.
Yeah,
Sure. Right.
Sure.
And so I guess what I'm asking is, I don't even know what I'm asking anymore.
Go ahead.
I think a lot of times when I work with guys, one of the questions I have to ask is the bigger issue we're tackling here shame around this activity or compulsion around the activity? Because I think both can happen and both can be intertwined, and it's good to separate that.
Shame drives compulsions for all mammals. So
I don't know
whatever.
about that. I think fear.
All
I think fear
compulsions.
drives a lot of.
Go back to Freud.
Too.
We were just talking about Freud at the beginning of this, right? We learned this from Freud.
Anybody even hear me, or
mammals?
am I just talking to the mic?
All mammals. If you
I just
do it
hung
with
out
your,
with goats today. I don't think they have shame, man.
I
let
don't
me
agree.
Let me give you an example. When I was working with a young man who was very devoted to his Christian faith, and he came in just absolutely distraught, like his life was wrecked. And I found out the issue was he looked at Instagram and had a lustful, like no masturbation, just had a lustful thought. And this was like wrecking his life. Like that's
Yeah.
very much on the shame side. Like the compulsion.
Absolutely.
The compulsion's not an issue. The
Yeah.
young man I told you about earlier, I looked at porn 13 hours. I missed work. The compulsion's a very big problem there.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, compulsive behavior happens in OCD, but no one thinks that's addiction.
I
See,
think. Oh, good.
I was going to say, Ryan, when you brought up that example, it made me think of one client I worked with in particular who had a persistent fear that he would view pornography, and then he had a fear that, and I've seen more than one case like this too, where he, how would I say that? He was worried that somebody might be underage, that he might have viewed something underage, and he never had. And if you trace his history, he never did.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting, and so we chalked that up to a more OCD compulsion type problem in that case.
Yeah.
And so we worked on the shame and on self-regulation related to the shame and reframing surrounding the shame, and he showed improvement through that. Hey, I do want to say something else about the phones though, because we haven't touched on that quite as much. And I want to give you, I'm really curious what you think about, this is just Jonathan's theory of something that's going on with the phones. I don't think this pertains to pornography as much.
Okay.
So with phone use, I'm pulling this from several sources, from a TED Talk, from a neuroscientist that I would have to go look up. I can look it up and send it to you guys, or maybe I'll tweet it out later.
Yeah.
Y'all familiar with the concept of default mode network?
Yeah.
Heard
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
Probably. I figure
Yes.
Patrick probably was. Some of you other guys may. I think that other people have described default mode network in other ways. I think Milton Erickson described default mode network as trance.
Sure.
And I think the average layperson describes default mode network as daydreaming. I think this is all overlapping phenomenon based on these various avenues of research outlets that I've plugged into over the years, or treatment outlets that I've plugged into. And so I took some preliminary hypnotherapy training, and we talked about trance and how the average person, it's estimated, goes into trance maybe at least 12 times a day. And you think about all those kids in classrooms daydreaming, and this is a totally normal phenomenon. So that was one of the things that they trained us to orient clients to as part of informed consent, is that trance is not magic. It's a natural neurological state that you drift into and out of.
Sure.
And hypnotherapy is just a set of techniques to help you select your way into a trance. And but this TED Talk, she was talking about the function of default mode network is at least twofold. It's to help the individual process anxiety, and it's part of the memory consolidation process. There's also an Andrew Huberman episode where he talks about one of the best things that you could do, and I love this. I've used this because I do workshops all the time. The best thing you can do is provide somebody with about 30 seconds of silence, and just let everybody sit there with their eyes closed for 30 seconds, and your recent memories play rapid fire in reverse. And that's part of your memory consolidation process. So I think a lot of this is the crux of the theory. I think a lot of smartphone use is avoidance of short-term anxiety. And so on this TED Talk, she was talking about how one of the risks of smartphones is that you don't process anxiety via natural mechanisms during the day. You're constantly putting off processing short-term anxiety until the end of the day, and then you end up with things like sleep problems, attention problems, because you have this emotional burden that you were supposed to be offloading continuously, and you haven't done that, and then you end up long-term in a mess.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and
can
I
you
would
guys-
add that there are other
can everybody hear
problems
me?
in addition to that, such
My
as like
speaker dead?
problematic caffeine use.
I think my speaker's dead.
Jake, adult Jake, we can't hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Adult Jake?
So you can't
why
hear
can't
me.
we hear you, Adult Jake?
I
We
don't
could,
know.
but now we
You
can't.
could hear me before though, right?
Let's see
I'm gonna go
what's
back.
going on with adult Jake.
Wow, he left.
Oh, he
Okay,
is
trying
well,
offended. So
he's
I
trying to
wanted
let
to,
me-
I'm sorry. Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead, Jacob.
Jonathan, just to jump off your thing, and this is why with a lot of my clients that I see who are just they're in a rut, they feel like they're losing their mojo, is uh, leave their smartphone at home, no headphones, and make yourself go on a walk
Yeah.
during the day and think about how goats do not have shame. In fact,
So I wanna get vulnerable here. Since with 12 steps vulnerability is big, therapy vulnerability is big.
Yeah.
In January I'll be sober for 9 years,
Proud of you.
and thank you. Years into my sobriety, I held on to 3 addictions. One was pornography, one was
Sure.
binge eating,
Sure.
and one was nicotine. And
Sure.
in the last 2 years, my biggest addiction has been, smartphone addiction, primarily X. No thanks to present company. And I can say
we're addictive.
all those things had
Hey, man, some of
both
us left the
positive and
group chat,
negative
okay?
reinforcement. There's some kind of a euphoria, in all those, not the same type of euphoria as a hit of cocaine, but some type of like happy feelings, basically. And with all of them, I'm trying to make those negative, icky feelings go away. And there's some success in making those negative, icky feelings go away. Does that make sense?
Why is euphoria bad? Someone educate me. Why is euphoria bad? I am an addiction specialist and I have no problem with people seeking out euphoria. I think euphoria is awesome. I have amazing food. I have good sex.
Who says
I
it?
watch a funny movie.
Who says it's bad?
I experience euphoria.
Why
Why is
can't
that bad?
I think
be
it
heard?
comes with, like you
This
see
is not working.
consequences. I recognize consequences. I don't want those consequences. I want to stop the behavior and I continue doing the behavior.
You're
how
telling me
about this?
X is too
I-
much euphoria?
It's
Is that what you're
If
saying?
I'm following Dr. Patrick Lockwood, it is.
it can be a time wasting mechanism. How about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Of
It
course it
becomes
is.
the guilt of there are things that I should do that are somewhat onerous, but I will be very, very happy once they're done. But I'm going to shit talk on Twitter.
But so the problem that I have with this generally, and I do appreciate your vulnerability because I think a lot of people of our generation and older generations and younger generations are struggling and they have no desire. Like I used to smoke cigarettes. I still miss it every day, even though I know it's terrible for me, but like that's a different thing than coping with Twitter, right? Because generally speaking, the avoidance behavior that we're all equally engaging in by being online and fucking around with each other, it has multiple pro-social purposes in addition to like anti-goal purposes, right? And so I think about like Jonathan Shedler, who I imagine all of us follow. And like he talks about trade-offs a lot because he's I think a very reasonable, more analytically minded clinician where it's like everything we do is not perfect. Like everything we do has trade-offs, right? So we always have defense mechanisms like humor or whatever. We always do things to tolerate uncomfortability and uncertainty because that's life. Life is full of uncertainty and uncomfortability. And so the question is, are these trade-offs really worth it? Not is this good or bad. It's not black and white. It's like, to what degree is this trade-off really worth it? Is screwing around on Twitter for an hour really worth it? To me, it is. I don't mind burning an hour a day or whatever on Twitter because I get to screw around and meet neat people and learn things and challenge things and make Ed Perrin uncomfortable and all these things. You know what I mean?
Can you guys hear
It
me?
doesn't like to be as disreputable as the rest of us.
He
Can I
has
be
an image
heard
to
yet?
maintain.
Or is
He
it
really
still
does.
not working?
I wish he could hear that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Is this still not working? Blah, blah,
That's
blah, blah,
He
blah.
will. We're going to share
Can I
that clip
talk?
with him.
So, go ahead.
You still
Well,
can't.
a lot of it
still
is
can't hear
is
me.
like
Yeah.
our Lord and Savior B.F. Skinner, peace be upon him, found intermittent schedules of reinforcement. Like I've gotten
Yeah.
some of the biggest money bag opportunities and consulting gigs
Yep.
in my life from like
Yep.
my 20,000th post on Twitter
Yep.
randomly. Couldn't be
Yep.
predicted out of
Yep.
something I never would. Like if you anyway, it's hard to not delve into it because you don't know when the reward's going to come. Because
Yeah.
some of you boys are
Yeah.
funny.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I think, back to
sometimes.
Jonathan talking about that trance state. I think, if you're kind of just like doom scrolling, just kind of mindlessly scrolling, that kind of is like a trance state, I think.
Maybe. I don't know.
It probably is. I would call it an unproductive, a maladaptive trance state, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably not processing or tolerating anxiety in that moment.
Yeah.
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 And I think I can connect that concept to just manhood and manliness too, which is the idea that as my good friend Jacob says sometimes, but it's not Jacob when he says this. It's very wise. To be a man is to be responsible for all things, and at least that's the impulse. I think that's awesome. That's an awesome quote. I think that's a good frame through which to view men, because I think that's the standard we hold ourselves to many times, whether that is always fair to ourselves or not. And it may not always be fair and 100%, but I think that's the kind of the default tilt that we find ourselves in, and it is what we should do many times. So if you're talking about avoiding short-term anxiety, to be a man in that is to find a way to master the thing that's keeping you from dealing with short-term anxiety. Now that's a very masculine thing to do. So that's a separate thought from whether we would define it as addiction or whether we would define it as a compulsion. I think if you're chalking that up to masculinity or you're connecting it to masculinity, I think we would probably all agree that we have a responsibility to master this rather than it master us, because to be a man is to be responsible for all things.
Adult Jake, you got a lot of background noise. Can you mute when you're not speaking?
Oh, I'll bet that
It sounds like a trap house.
Or a washer and dryer or something.
Yeah.
It is.
Speaking of addiction,
he's building a meth lab back there.
well,
Walter White style.
Well, and about the anxiety thing, and about to be a man is to be responsible for all things. I got that from that writer Jerry. You see, he's kind of a cantankerous fellow, but one of the most effective things I've seen with the people I work with in my clinic is basic training on locus of control. And how many of them, the way they talk, it's a self-victimhood, et cetera, and a lot of them have never heard of locus of control. And so I love whiteboard work. I've got a great big whiteboard in my office, and we have them, and circles of where, at what point can you be shoulders back, chin towards God, versus I better keep my head down because this will destroy me and there's nothing I can do about it, right? And so just helping them figure out where in the concentric circles they can have greater and greater mastery and control, and have them just focus on that has just been miraculous for a lot of these people, or men and women both, by the way.
Yeah.
So, Adult Jake, do you have anything to say on the addiction issue?
What do you think Ryan's on wearing that jacket?
Hey, I want to let you know the look I'm going for. The look I'm going for here today is if you order Jordan Peterson on Wish.
Oh.
JD Haltigan may have something to say about that too.
Touchdown.
He's as compulsorily obsessed with his jackets as Ed is with his cardigans. Why isn't Ed here? Did he really screw up the time?
He's sick. He texted me he's sick.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys did a great job. Nice work. I did want to talk about the compulsion versus addiction thing. I get, Patrick, where you're coming from. I do. I wish that I could change everybody's language to say the proper things. I myself use the phrase chaos addiction when I'm describing people who are perpetually consumed by disorganization and drama and whatnot. And it's easy for the listening audience to consume that because they reasonably know what addiction is and they reasonably know what chaos is, and put them together. They start talking obsessions or compulsions and they go a different direction. Now, I will make it my mission from this point forward to start educating people on the difference. And I appreciate that. And I thank you for helping me do that, because I think if I can be a more educated, intelligent clinician, I'll be a better one. So I'm going to start framing things like that. What I wonder is, back to the euphoria thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with chasing euphoria. we have to talk about balance, though. And I think a responsible person, especially when we're talking about men and masculinity and leadership and mastery of things, I think a responsible person has to survey the entire landscape of whatever's going on in life and figure out what the balance is. Because no, it's not wrong to go throw an hour into X and meet some cool people and have some neat dialogue and expand our brains, if we keep it in balance, right? If you start doing that 9 hours a day, like is the problem with the teens and why they're mentally ill, that becomes a problem. Now, who calls what is and is not a balance? That becomes judgmental. Again, I have no problem with, I haven't actually said this very often in public, but I actually have no problem with judgmentalism because we've turned it into a bad word. It's become a naughty phrase, like consequence. Consequence is not a bad phrase. It's just a natural byproduct of a decision. Judgment is what happens when we use discretion and we assess something with values placed on it. And for whatever reason, our grad schools decided to strip all the values out because apparently values are bad or something. And I think I know why, but I'm not going to get into it here. The point is we need to return some of this stuff because judgment forms the basis of all assessment of illness altogether. Because if you have that functional definition of mental disorder, which is massive interference in your life, right? It's like clinically significant distress or impairment in important areas of functioning. Well, I'm making a judgment call on whether or not that's bad for you. Because as we all probably learned in grad school, somebody walks in and says, I have an anger problem. And the wife says, no, you have a drinking problem. He goes, that's not actually a problem. Now we have a discussion about what the values are around that judgment. And it's not up to me to say whether or not it's a problem. It's up to me to survey all the data, make an assessment, then call it what it is. And that is a judgmental decision. So I think when we're talking about the kids, and I call this avoidance, by the way, Jonathan, I call it all avoidance. You're avoiding something. You're avoiding your shame. You're avoiding your sadness. You're avoiding your pain. You're avoiding homework, right? It's a functional avoidance to have your phone in your hand. Guns and mental health, by the way. That's upside down.
Yeah.
To be avoiding, and what are we avoiding? It could be personal responsibility. It could be deep analysis of self. But for me, what it always comes down to is an avoidance of vulnerability, the vulnerability of being held accountable to do your homework, the vulnerability of committing to making the dinner, doing the dishes, whatever it is. It's an ejection. And this is why I love emotional functioning so much, is because if you can ride the emotional wave through the peak of the wave where vulnerability happens, because you don't necessarily get to control how much and how long or whether you feel something, you get to control how much and how long you feel it. If you avoid, then you avoid vulnerability. If you avoid vulnerability, you're also avoiding intimacy with your project, intimacy with your teammates, intimacy with your spouse, intimacy with your children, intimacy with whatever's going on, right? That's where I think we fall apart. And if I don't have a value judgment that avoidance of intimacy is bad, and I can base this not just on my own belief structure or whatever, I can base it on neuroscience and evolutionary adaptivity, saying we need to hang together in communities, we need the tribe, we need to rely on each other, then I can say it's really functionally bad to avoid intimacy. And what you're doing with the too much softball, the too much drinking, the too much nicotine, the too much pornography, the too much whatever it is, you're avoiding. And you're avoiding something deep and personal and intimate. Now let's figure out what it is. I can't get there if I don't judge it. If I don't judge it as good and bad. So yes, I think it is good and bad, but that balance out of whack is what's good or bad. It's not whether or not you participate in the nicotine or the whatever. It's how much you do it in relation to whatever the individual's priorities are. So we go, what are your values? What are your priorities? What matters to you? And then we rank order them and say, is nicotine getting in the way? Is alcohol getting in the way? Is pornography getting in the way? Because you just told me that these top things are what you value the most. If you value your family and your friends and your children, then why are you spending time anywhere else except to augment and enhance that, right? So that's my take on it. Thank you for allowing me 5 minutes. I'm sorry I was 40 minutes late, but I got a new puppy. And I'm sorry,
very
it
well
sounds like
said.
a trap house back here. It's actually the fish tank bubbling in the background. It's not.
Oh,
it's
it's
not
the
like
fish
bongs
tank.
or
It's not a meth lab. Got it.
Sure, the fish tank. Yeah, I got a lot of clients that are,
The
Yeah.
fish
we got to pull them away from the fish tank.
The bubble mower.
So,
It's a bubble mower
so,
or water
we
pump.
could-
Perfect.
we can keep going on this topic we've been on for 45 minutes now, or we could go. I think
Let's
it
talk
was
about the knives I got to my throat Oh, look
Oh,
at that.
real
Oh,
quick,
the
real
best,
is
quick.
that
best
a-
gun competition. I forgot.
Wait.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that are those SIGs? Because
These
I'm
are-
worried if you drop one.
Hey, can I
Turns
throw
out-
something?
Turns out
Can I
that's
back
not
up
true.
Adult Jake real quick?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the I love languages. I moved to Scandinavia and just learning Swedish and then Norwegian and Danish and then comparing the meanings between English versus those words,
Mhm.
one of the coolest things I saw recently that has helped me in the clinic is the old English concept of self-control. What we say, like, hey, govern yourself or manage yourself. It was wield yourself. Wield yourself as a power.
Yeah.
You've got to, as a man, you have to be self-wielding. And so as Jake says, Adult Jake, what are you doing with your time and your attentions? Are you wielding yourself? And I think it just creates an incredible
He disappeared.
shield, a real defense
Yes.
against the
props.
evils of the world.
Yes, I love it.
I love that Jacob and I were on the exact same wavelength to get ready for today. We're very different personality wise, but I love the resonance that happens sometimes. See, we still have props over there, and we have both kinds of props because that was well said and well propped. Oh, what we got? Oh, is that the whiskey shelf? I feel like I saw some
hope it didn't-
gentleman Jack over there.
I saw triggers on the screen. I figured I could put some other triggers on the screen. Literal, actual
Okay.
triggers versus metaphorical triggers. Yeah,
So-
that's my whiskey shelf.
So I have two guns, one for each of you.
Doc Holliday.
There you
Oh.
go. So this is
Jack,
my
Probably
6
seeing
hour
double.
P226 Mark 25, and so this is connected to Rufus because Rufus was harvested with this exact SIG.
Wow.
I got to go on an alligator hunt in Florida back in 2021 for my buddy Kyle's birthday, and I checked this bad boy in my luggage and took it with me. It's like, I want to use one of my own guns. And if y'all don't know, if I get it a little closer, you see the little anchor on the side there.
Yeah.
So that the Mark 25 is the Navy SEAL version.
Yeah.
And it's saltwater. I wasn't like trying to LARP as a Navy SEAL or anything. What happened is I go to buy pawn shops here in town fairly often, and $630.
What?
That seems like a deal.
It's a deal, and it had no box, but it had 6 mags with it. And the Mark 25 is saltwater resistant. So I was like, if I'm going to go in the swamp, heck yeah, this is the one to do. So this is my alligator harvesting gun. I actually got this one earlier, same pawn shop, different location, for $700. This is a Sig Sauer P227. It's the same frame design. This one's a little bit larger. This is the 45 ACP. This is the 9mm. I'm a sucker for these. If I find a good deal on one, I'm probably going to buy it, even with the whole P320 controversy that's going on. I'm just going to go ahead and admit that this is my compulsion or addiction. I'm not sure. Is the older frame SIG models.
It doesn't matter. I mean, apparently the hinge point is whether or not you get euphoria.
That's true. Yes, that's true. Well, I definitely get euphoria from those particular 6 hours. I do.
What about
From
negative
purchasing them, shooting
reinforcement?
them?
Does holding
Do you
the
have
guns make
withdrawals?
the achy feelings go away?
Yes, always.
Negative reinforcement is the removal of an adverse stimulus, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so when you're saying, because I was thinking of it differently here, engaging in the compulsion or the addictive behavior
Yeah.
takes,
Holding guns takes
quitting
away
the
the
compulsion.
anxiety.
Sorry. Yeah. I hear that. The other angle is quitting the addiction or the compulsion also removes some of the adverse stimuli like
Ooh, okay.
hangovers and withdrawal symptoms
Yeah.
and shame and guilt, right?
I
Couldn't
like
we
that.
make an argument for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to
Yeah.
tomorrow morning in group.
Sweet.
Nice.
There you go.
So I've got a question from Jane Studdick, friend of the show,
Okay.
who asks, why is it hard for us to talk about male abuse victims? Because I've seen a number of posts, including from Adult Jake recently, and that post got a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
I don't know that it did actually. I think it
I got a
got
few.
some pushback. It got
Some,
some,
yeah.
but if you look at the accounts that did the pushing back,
Mhm.
they're Looney Tunes accounts. Like they're off the reservation. Nothing that they say was even near the mainstream. They're 7 standard deviations away from the mean, right? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know that it did. I prefer, and this may be my own confirmation bias. I think I'm well adjusted enough now on X to look at comment sections and respond appropriately without getting my ego in the way. And I notice my ego start to get in the way, and I'm like, delete. I don't need to respond to this
Yeah.
person.
Oh, yeah.
That's why he's a dull
And
jig.
there were yeah, that's true. There were ample replies that supported it and one of them, which Jonathan and I were texting about earlier, said Jesus was Marxist is the handle, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is clever. But absolutely supporting it was a screenshot that person repeatedly posted, highlighting some sort of study from, I didn't bother to look it up because I had a busy day, but the link was in there, and the AI generated summary showed that 70% of abuse is perpetrated by women in non-mutual competitive situations. I thought that was interesting. Obviously, I'm not looking for, I'm not going to cherry pick studies to prove my point. That's not how I roll. What I did was I retweeted the meme that said, "What opinion would have you like this?" And sure enough, it did, right? Because it's like it's outside of people's Overton window to think that males can be equally or more frequently abused than women. And of course, everybody jumped right to the physical abuse, which admittedly, statistically, probably is less likely if reported accurately. And I'm not willing to concede that it's reported accurately. I will absolutely go to my grave believing that males get abused more often psychologically than females. Absolutely will believe that because, and to answer Jane's question, we are not culturally allowed to talk about it because to talk about it equals weakness. We cannot be perceived as weak. Admitting that we've been abused in any way whatsoever, including in an EEOC complaint, perhaps, is tantamount to weakness. So we're just going to tuck chin to chest and move forward. And I think that's why we don't discuss this. We should discuss it more.
Jonathan and I,
Josh would be a great addition to this, I think, by the way.
Yeah, Jonathan and I were sharing, love songs back and forth on our chat about about some of the hardship, mourning, breakup, regret that has to have with men when they get out of a relationship that I call relational Vietnam, where they've had Charlie in the Wire for who knows how long, and they're trying to find their Nurse Betty, but all they can see is Charlie in the Wire. Which brings us to the topic that's been hot lately of cluster B. And I don't know, Patrick, if it was you, but cluster B personality organization, not even disorders.
Yeah.
And how often that's celebrated within certain demographics, and that makes it impossible to live or love with these people without hell.
Could
By the
you
way,
explain
before
the
you
difference
answer,
between cluster B personality disorder and organization?
Yeah. So I'll try to be simple as opposed to my usual long-winded version of this.
yeah,
So,
you're pretty simple, all right.
yeah, I'm the simplest guy. So there are in the DSM-5-TR, our diagnostic Bible, there are 4 cluster B personality disorders: narcissistic, antisocial, histrionic, and everyone's favorite, borderline personality disorder. And so if we just say very simply, there's the disordered version of these personality styles. Hopefully that works for everybody. So we can be organized. Our personality is like a framework. It's like a blueprint for how we take in information about the outside world, respond to it emotionally, and make it make sense about ourselves, right? And so people can be organized, and like I myself, admittedly, am organized in a very narcissistic way. There's zero doubt about myself or anyone else who knows me that I like attention, I like being special, I like being treated special, and I have created a life where I am treated special because I'm a professor and people stare at me and listen to me 6 hours a day, 3 days a week. And so I'm very clear that I like attention, I like feeling special, I like being better than in ways that make sense to who I am as a person. Right?
Wait 1 second, please. Wait. Let me ask.
Yeah.
Because back to grad school, they say, don't diagnose yourself just because you've checked boxes, right? Now,
not.
right. Well, you said narcissistic. Now, I know you didn't say I have NPD full blown, right? So I just want to say, if anybody's listening to this and they want to take these words and strip them out of context, I think all of what you just listed applies in most cases to anyone who's ever going to have success at anything ever. So I
Yes,
just want to
and
throw that out
people
there.
who are more successful are more narcissistically organized.
Yeah, and it's not pathological until it starts checking the box of that qualifiable mental disorder, which is impairment in your important areas of functioning.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as a result of my desire to be special and important, I have had some consequences relationally, but I've also grown out of them, which means that I'm probably not disordered in that sense. Because if I can grow maturationally through therapy, through friends, through religion, through God, through all these things to have a better relationship with myself and my needs, that's not disordered. Like Charlie Sheen's always going to be Charlie. Charlie's never not going to be Charlie, for instance. And so, there's a difference between being disordered and being organized a certain way. And once you realize that being organized a certain way has some niche specific advantages and some role specific advantages, it's totally not a problem. Just like being organized in a borderline type of way, although seems very chaotic, is also extremely useful in certain niches and certain contexts. And so the difference between being disordered, like Jake said, versus being organized is you have a fundamental way of operating in the world and seeing the world and receiving the world and making sense of the world, which is different than this fundamental way of operating and experiencing the world causes constant conflict, difficulties, and all these things, right? Across all relationships, time, and circumstances.
I just had like a
Yeah.
semi-epiphany
cluster Bs-
thought.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, that's
Jonathan.
okay. So I just B.F. Skinner got brought up earlier, and
Our
B.F.
Lord and
Skinner.
Savior.
All hail to him.
Yeah,
be
exactly. Our
upon
Lord and
him.
Savior. Peace be upon him. I had my systematic theology professor asked us one day in class, who is the person you can think of in history who had the lowest view of human nature? And
Ayn
we
Rand.
all thought about it, and we thought, oh, we're naming all these. Oh, who'd you say?
Ayn Rand.
Ayn
but
Rand,
I'm
he's
kidding.
correct.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
But you're correct, though, as well.
I was gonna say
my
Socrates,
professor,
but
we're thinking like, theologians maybe. And so we're naming, all these theologians from church
Augustine.
history. And then he goes, no, I think it's B.F. Skinner.
Oh, I think it's James Dobson, but that's just me.
No,
Controversy.
oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Let me connect a thought there. The reason he said that is because
Yeah.
B.F. Skinner said things like, and this is just going to be a paraphrase.
Yeah.
I can behaviorally train somebody into a new person.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm going to connect that actually to social constructivism, because social constructivism holds something in common with that, I think, which is that you can re-engineer people. And so there's a little bit of like phenomenological or philosophical overlap between Skinnerian psychology and social constructivism, postmodern therapy.
Yeah.
I'd never thought of those two things together till just now, and that's kind of blowing my mind. And y'all feel free to poke holes in that, because that's just
No, isn't that basically the I guess the friction that we have between whether or not we ask somebody to start doing a certain thing because it'll change essentially the way they behave, and we're treating them like a pet, and we're
Yes.
training them, versus honoring their own internal workings and their internal locus control, which adolescent Jake mentioned earlier, where we don't focus enough on locus control. And
yes.
and like we have to if we're honoring autonomy, then we're not training them. Now they can clear their throat and raise their hand and sign the document and consent
Right.
to being trained, I suppose. But then we have to ask the question, are we treating symptoms or problems? And I think
Yeah.
training in the strictest behavioral way, all your ABA therapy and your BCBA people, they're gonna say, yeah, what we do is effective. Yeah, it's also evidence based, and we can have that argument too. But I think I would submit that you're treating symptoms, not problems. I still want to know the why to the what, and go to the why, and then if we get the root, metaphorically speaking, then the leaves just disappear, they change or whatever. I'm not going to sit here and chase leaves around to try to alter the bush.
Yeah.
Bush.
So let me tell you all why that collided in my head is because of what Patrick was just saying about personality organization. When I was a young therapist, I was kind of more on the postmodernity and B.F. Skinner view of things, where, I kind of thought like, yeah, we could totally change somebody's personality. And that was kind of somewhat maybe a little bit of It could be naivete, could be just pride and excitement about the profession that I was entering, and excitement to learn and hope. And those things can overlap. But I feel like we're, at least in our corner of the internet, we're seeing a reclamation of this idea of personality organization that kind of got abandoned by postmodern therapy.
Yeah, because that
And
means there's something real about you that doesn't change a whole lot, you
that's
know?
that's an objective reality about a person that's immutable and unchangeable
Mhm.
that you cannot socially re-engineer.
Well, to be fair, it can be muted, it can be changed
Sure.
to some degree, but
Yeah, I mean, we've
you know,
all seen Jason
Tim-
Bourne movies.
Exactly.
I have not,
exactly.
but I believe you.
Oh, well, you should. Definitely the first one.
Yeah.
As I've talked about on the Twitter, my favorite couples to work with are some version of high conflict, high performer, much
Yeah.
to lose if the relationship goes to shit.
Yep.
And I started having them sent to me because I can be a very high conflict person and
Yeah.
not react to it unless I want
Right.
to, right? That's a
Right.
special thing about me, thank God. But what my favorite professor in undergrad was a hardcore Skinnerian. Like that's all he was. And wouldn't you know it, it's phenomenal going through like Marine Corps officer training and then, pre-deployment training, having that understanding of what they're trying to do to you and like, trust falling back into it. So it works. But I've had a lot of luck with high conflict couples saying, okay, if we want this to work out, let's make an agreement, kind of almost top down, of what we are allowed to do, almost to break off, because they're fucking things up. Sorry for the language.
Yeah.
They're fucking things up because they have too much latitude.
Yeah.
And so we pull it back into, this is literally what we're allowed to do. And when they do that for several weeks, all of a sudden they like each other again. And so then we're able to, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so we're able to freeze frame that and say, okay, you can't pretend forever. You were able to pretend for a little bit, but it was good. Now you know it can be good. So let's, as adult Jake said, let's talk about why we are assholes to each other. Like, what the fuck? And we get it all out. And it works.
You're not allowed to do that in grad school. They don't teach that. I have a student right now who's very, very, very excited to work with me /Zephyr because we do what you do, which is provide structure and direction and judgment and discretion and assessment and an orientation toward a goal. And in grad school, they say, don't do that. Don't tell people what to do.
No.
And if you can't call balls and strikes, then you're not going to have a very good game because nobody knows what the rules are. And that's exactly what you just described. You got relationships that are in conflict because nobody knows what the rules are. And we've been told in grad schools across the country, maybe not Patrick's because he's special, but everybody that I've been coaching, I've had to deprogram like 90% of what they learn because what they get taught is don't you dare position yourself as the expert. And it's like, well, why did they hire me?
Why are they paying me?
Affirmation and validation, uber alles.
So go ahead, Patrick.
I want to go back to Timu Jordan Peterson's original question.
Perfect. I was going to do that. You didn't.
Jordan Peterson.
So the original question from Twitter was, why can't men openly discuss the fact that they're emotionally abused and things like that? It's because we have too much latitude. We put up with too much shit. And I genuinely believe what you said, immature Jake, that putting up with too much latitude.
It's not that hard, man. It's not that mean.
But like putting up with too much is something that we are told we are supposed to do, which is absolute bullshit. Like I don't put up with a lot of shit in my romantic relationship of 13 years. I don't put up with any shit with my colleagues. I don't put up with any shit with my professor colleagues.
I don't think that's the message. I'm going to tweak that a little bit. I don't think the message is you're supposed to put up with more. I think the message is we're not making you put up with anything. Like it's very gaslighty.
I think it's the same thing.
If I start, I see what your point is. I'm saying that if it were, hey, just keep carrying the load because your shoulders are strong, we would say, I'm tired. You're not allowed to say I'm tired because the definition of what you're carrying isn't even heavy, right? Like there's the crux. We can't argue that when it's like, I do this, right? And they go, so it's not,
But
there's no acknowledgement that it's even a burden, let alone
yeah, I think
that we can argue that we need a break.
so. I think it's both things. I think it's both we're not carrying anything, or it's like it's just expected that we carry these things, or that
Yes,
it's no
yes.
big deal because men don't feel a whole lot. Is the other I think weird stereotype that guys
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have
because we're totally
feelings
not
or
killing
something.
ourselves at 2.5x the times of women.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. The suicide and drug addiction. It's clearly that we have no right. Like we're all fine, obviously.
I want to come in on Patrick's side here. One of the I like mantras for people.
Yeah.
And one of the mantras I give to both men and women is from the greatest lyricist of our time, Alanis Morissette. I don't know who you're talking to with such fucking disrespect is one of her stanzas. And I tell people, either especially those with a lot of negative self-talk, you got to be like, whoa,
you
buddy,
ought
who
to
the
know.
fuck you
That's what you tell them.
is that where that's from? I don't know. She's just
Isn't
the
it
greatest
ironic?
lyricist of our time, so I absorb it. But also, there has to be a mechanism within a relationship for you to say to your significant other when they cross that line, honestly, I don't know who you're talking to with such fucking disrespect. Like, who is this person? Right? Shoulders
Yeah.
back, chin towards God.
Yeah.
And
I
and
wanna-
that's
Go ahead.
well, to be a man is to be responsible for all things. And a lot of what I'm teaching these guys is you will set the tone often for how
Mhm.
bitchy the relationship is, unless you have a very disordered woman with you. But if you are bitchy, she will meet your example and exceed you. Often. Not perfect, but don't
That's pretty good.
go down that road, sir.
Mhm.
Anyway,
I
Jordan?
want to try to
That's- I
connect
never
a few
considered that.
dots. You really set something off in my mind, Jacob, when you're talking about you add some kind of
adolescent Jake
guardrails.
or
Adolescent Jake,
okay.
rebellious teenager Jake.
Whole
No,
name
you add
Jake.
some
You don't get to have a
guardrails, you
nickname
add some
until you're an adult.
constraints, you add some boundaries to this relationship, and then it's able to thrive, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought I was reading Psalm 119 out of the Bible the other day, and it's all about how, like, I follow your law, and that gives me freedom and liberation, which is kind of counterintuitive in the mind. Like 18 years ago, I walked away from my faith because I thought I was liberating myself from that law. 3 years ago, I came back because I realized freedom comes in like following the law. And I think of Thomas Sowell, the constrained versus the unconstrained vision. Like the constrained vision of society allows a flourishing society. Jonathan, on this podcast, a couple times, you've talked about, like, as an individual, I have to self-control myself, and societies have to self-limit themselves, right? There's this idea of, like, counterintuitively, I think I'm going to be free if I remove all the guardrails, and counterintuitively, giving myself guardrails gives, like, having that direction gives me freedom. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Yes.
100%. And that speaks to the addiction thing too. It's like when you learn like tolerance, right? If you're a non-addict drug user, you take tolerance breaks. You learn the constraints that you have to have in order to continue enjoying the substance. Same thing with food, same thing with sex. Like we are designed biologically to have constraints and to use them, even if you have drastic changes in your personality.
By the way,
I want to.
we're going.
Adult
Let me
Jake?
just say this real quick, and then because I do want to hear your opinion on this, actually, Jonathan. We're going through a series at church focusing on the Sabbath. It's part of just a little breakout thing that we're doing, and there's a rhythm. I found out. I can't cite the literature, but I learned that there's a rhythm. Some country a couple hundred years ago tried to go to like an 8-day work week calendar, and it didn't work because the rhythm is 6 on 1. It was the French, actually. Yes, thank you.
I'm married to a French girl, I know.
Yeah, so this rhythm is 6 on 1 off, 6 on 1 off, 6 on 1 off, and that natural biological rhythm takes place in our bodies as well. We need rest. Rest is structure. Built-in rest is design structure. If you think that you can override that by doing more because you're ungovernable or whatever, and I'm just going to work a whole bunch and accumulate wealth and all that stuff, you will go off the rails, much like societies need constraints. One of the constraints I think we naturally have is take a break. Work 6 days, take a break. And however that looks is irrelevant. What matters is that you take a break because that's part of constraint. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a beautiful point, and Sabbath is a really it's a really powerful thing theologically, I think, and psychologically. So I'm going to respond to you, and then I'm gonna chime in with what I want to say after that. I'll see if I can tie it together. So a couple of times I've gotten to give communion thoughts at church where I attend, and something I usually bring up when we get to the offering part of it, that's always part that feels a little bit awkward for people. That's where you're going to pass the plate and you're going to donate money to the church, right? And a lot of times I'll talk about Sabbath when I'm doing the offering part of the thought. And those things, Sabbath and generosity, tithing, tie really closely theologically if you look at like the history of Israel, because it's absurd. The idea is absurd to the world, to the average person, that I'm going to work for 5 days or 6 days in a row, and for one day I'm not allowed to do anything. Well, you're in agrarian society, so you're going to farm the land, you're going to grow food, you're going to have your entire survival dependent on that. And so it is an act of trust in God to relinquish control over your own survival for however long you rest, in order to be able to receive that rest as a blessing from God, and then trust God that He's going to ensure your survival, because you could die if you don't work. And tithing is very similar if you look at the background of what's happening with tithing. So money is our food that we're growing today, and so we work X number of days and then we rest. And giving of money away is an act of trust and submission. God, I trust you to take care of me because I'm giving the means away to you that would ensure my own survival if I have it.
And
And
by the
people
way,
talk
what
all. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what more vulnerable act could you demonstrate than by sacrificing your top tenth, or as biblically commanded?
Yep.
Like that's a really vulnerable thing to do that will drive intimacy not only between you and God, but between you and the people watching you do it, because you're modeling for them that you don't have to have things in your control, as an earthly person.
It's an intentional discipline of rejecting fear or mastering fear of your own survival or fear of your own death in favor of obedience to God. And that is a powerful way for an act of self-mastery. And I wouldn't say necessarily it's self-mastery, and that's kind of the psychological description of it, or maybe that's what's happening psychologically, but I think there's a spiritual thing happening too. I'm actually going to shut up, and I want to see if anybody else wants to reflect on that. I did have something I want to say in response to Jane in a little bit.
Go ahead, Jake.
I saw a pointy finger. My other love in this life is industrial organizational psychology and organizational development. It's what I did for almost a decade. And you would think that unlimited resources and time would create great results. It's the theory of constraint creates results. Amazon Web Services and Amazon had such phenomenal, crazy growth because everything down to the spend and the time was constrained heavily by the organization. And then whatever you came up with, the question would be posed to you, kind of the moonshot question, which was more from Google. How would you do 10 times this with 10 times less? And and then you have to write it out on like a 2-page or 6-page memorandum of how you would do it. And it causes you to see what you're missing, what you're assuming. And so a lot of times with men who come to me, often they've never had a good male role model, but we start adding constraints, like on the 24 hours of time they have during a day. Are they prioritizing the sleep and the nutrition, and then getting rid of I wanted to say earlier, but like the lightweight sugar euphoria of like video games and things, where you can be engaged in meaningful activity, or you can be, defeating Call of Duty for the 5,000th time. It's not the same thing, right? It's not going to have the same results over time. And so we add constraints, and we add constraints to the relationship. The relationship is a very small circle, right?
Mhm.
It's too much, right? Anyway, I could go on and on.
I want to tie something back to something earlier when we were talking about social media. I just
Mm.
checked to see if there's any comments on the post about if anybody had any questions for our panel tonight. And I
Yeah.
realized adolescent Jake had liked one of my posts 1 minute ago. And then I realized the only reason I saw that is because I too was on Twitter.
Well, shame on both of you for your social
Compulsion,
media
compulsion,
addiction.
shame, compulsion, shame, compulsion, shame.
It's time for
Not
both of you to go
euphoric.
to rehab. You both, and you should go to rehab
Mhm.
today, right
Phone
now.
rehab.
Phone rehab.
Let me jump in and say something. So on Jake's post, I don't remember if it was yesterday or today. I jumped in there with some info. So the most knowledgeable person I know about like domestic violence issues and abuse in general is the really awesome current chair of my grad program. And she did some really amazing, groundbreaking work on cessation of intimate partner violence. I think she'd be fine with me mentioning her name. She's an awesome lady. Her name is Lisa Merchant, and I've learned so much from her on that. One of the things that she has found through her own digging into research is you have these cases where we're going to go into general systems theory and a little bit of Salvador Minuchin shifting the symptom bearer with this, because something that happens is, so you have a female who's been in a physically abusive relationship. She escapes that relationship. She gets with a new partner who's a good guy. And I'm going to be willing to bet at least some of y'all have seen this. And then she becomes the perpetrator of physical abuse. Anybody seen that?
Mhm.
It's been extremely common in my practice, and the general public does not know about this, does not have awareness of this issue. And so in learning from Lisa about this, she was explaining, so connecting it to Salvador Minuchin's shifting the symptom bearer, the female partner is in a homeostasis that's connected to the domestic abuse. It's serving a function in the relationship, not a good one, but it's a persistent behavior, so we know it's serving a function.
Yeah.
She gets in a relationship with a nice guy. There's no domestic abuse in this new relationship. There's no physical abuse in this relationship, and there's a weird intertwining of physical abuse and emotional attachment that helps maintain that homeostasis. And she doesn't know how to survive without it because of homeostasis. So she becomes the aggressor, and that's the shifting of the symptom bearer. Now, when that happens, one of two things usually occurs. There may be others, but two major things. The man goes chin to chest and just takes it and goes through it and just says to himself, it's not a big deal. She can't physically, she's not actually injuring me. And that's the physical size difference is a big factor in that. And then, but the other dominant thing that can happen or pattern is that the husband strikes back. And then that becomes a case of mutually initiated intimate partner violence. And that's not counted as abuse where the female is the aggressor, even though the female is the one who brought that pattern into the relationship. And it's right to treat it that way from a clinical standpoint, where the principle of mutuality in general systems theory says that in any interaction, both people have a degree of power and are somewhat responsible for the outcome. So clinically, you should treat it that way, but research phenomenologically, I'm not sure that's fair to treat those cases that turn into intimate partner violence where the male partner has no history of that in a male and female relationship. And so some of those cases kind of get hidden because of how we categorize things.
Well, and we've just spent how many ever years being indoctrinated with the belief that any shift away from the dominant narrative, which is whatever they say it is, by the way, but in this particular case is men only do wrong, women cannot do wrong, is victim blaming or victim shaming. You cannot ask, what role did you play in this? Because there is no alternative viewpoint, which is very binary and very narcissistic and very borderline-y. This is how you get systemically mentally ill entities. So that's created a large bee's nest for people to have to work around in our profession because of what you just described. It's like poke, 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 poke. Please don't do that anymore. Poke, poke, poke. Stop poking me. Poke, poke, poke. I swear to God, I'm going to whack you. Poke, poke, poke. Whack. Why'd you whack me? Right. I saw this in inpatient psych with the kids all the time. You know, you got one little knucklehead who just goes around causing problems behind the scenes
Props.
and then gets whacked for it. And who gets in trouble? Not that kid, except if the mental health techs are paying attention and they go, come here, you know. You
This
laughing
is
at
the
Vader
best.
behind me?
This is the best podcast I think I've ever been on.
I
Oh my
mean,
gosh, the props don't
may the
stop.
force be with you,
I'm
sir.
sorry,
May
that
the
was so
force
serious
be
what
with
you were saying, and I could not keep it together.
It was. Now, so Jake, to riff off of your post earlier, that caused it, you know,
I
20% conflict.
concentration disturbing.
About
Oh my
why men don't raise their paw if they're abused. I think some of it goes into why men don't go to therapy as often as women do. Is something that we had addressed earlier. I think from what I've seen, women are a lot more comfortable with sitting and talking about whatever for years and years and years with a therapist, whereas men tend to be, I guess, more chronological. Like, what's the point of this shit? What are we doing here? The loss of the concept of that there's a certain ergodicity with who we are as people. There's a certain core that we are or we are not, and you can't do anything to it to make it change. Treating men as though there is a certain core to them and talking them through, okay, let's figure out, I don't know what that is, dude. I don't know you. There are certain things that you will require to be a happy person. One of those is like respect. Like, as in, I don't think a man in his right mind or anybody in their right mind will sit there and be abused in whatever fashion for years and years by somebody. There's something going on with them that will allow it. I don't know who you're talking to with such fucking disrespect sort of framework. And so getting people, men particularly, to that point of here and no farther. It will stop here and no further, and then building them back up from there. I've had lovely relationships with men and their wives in clinic because we talk about there's certain things you must not do to each other. Almost more important than things you must do to each other. We'll build on that, the nice to haves. But there are things you cannot do. You can't just
Jake,
abuse people and get it away. Anyway,
Jake, do you think that there's a frog and pot dynamic where simply like it has to become permission giving first, which is like you have permission to set a boundary and say beyond this line you shall not cross before you say I won't tolerate anymore. And before that, you have to acknowledge what's going on. And before that, you have to have a recognition that it's even going on. And I think that in many of these circumstances where you've just got the one beaten spouse, right? It could be men or women, doesn't matter. But it's clear as day to those of us who, when they walk in the clinic, we go, I know what's going on here. Like instantly, you can see it in the lobby. But the frog in the pot doesn't know that the water's too hot until he dies. And I've often said the phrase to people in different circumstances, not necessarily in couples, because it's much, much harder to unpack 40 years of this. But I've said to adolescents who come from tumultuous backgrounds, abuse, neglect, violence, whatnot, and they're acting a fool now and they're in and out of the system. I say, look, you can put on a tough front to everybody else, but not to me, because I can see right through it. And I know that you're rotting on the inside. And I will use those exact words, and you watch the tears come forth, or like they just start shaking, right? They're not angry, but like, holy cow, this guy sees right through me, right? Now, with the men in this case, we're talking about who've just been flogged into submission for 45 years of marriage or 14 years of marriage. It doesn't really matter. They're clearly not in control. And I'm not saying control is the thing, but there clearly is an imbalance, and they're at the short end of it. How do you, well, first question is, do you think it's a frog in a pot thing? Because I think it is. And the second thing is, how do you bring this to their attention without completely imploding their worldview? I mean, it's very rude to just jerk the veil off of somebody's eyes, right? How do you do that?
when I meet somebody whose version of love is a kiss with a fist, whether it be emotional or physical, Um, I actually talked to them about ideological thought reform and the psychology of totalism, which the Communist Party of China through Mao
Mm.
reinvented that entire society. And just kidding.
We're all losing it.
Ryan captured a lot of it in his book, but the work from like Dr. Litvin on repatriating American prisoners of war who were captured and brainwashed, because that's what ideological thought reform is, worked with those prisoners of war to bring them back to not being brainwashed anymore. It's similar work on taking a normal person, brainwashing them into believing absurdities, like I deserve to be hurt, I deserve to be emotionally abused, I deserve to be mocked in public by my spouse, whatever, bringing them back to a point of no, you shall not pass, is tough and it's slow. Helmet gang. So,
Your face
Anyway.
is disappearing.
I know. Anyway, you as you say, you can't hit them directly with it because men are like, no, I'm not being abused. But if I like drawing the parallels of like Litvin lines out how ideological thought reform works as a process, and he wrote some scary stuff recently about how it's working in America right now with a lot of American Marxists. And there's a style to it. There's a pattern to it. China, the Communist Party of China, made it industrialized. They systematized it, and it's very similar to the experiencers of what we're talking about. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee it.
The question
Anyway,
is still
yeah,
how? How do you bring it to their attention without, punching them in the face
China.
and making them just, you're totally emasculating this guy in front of his wife. China.
Dr. Lockwood.
So
We're serious people.
Here's what I think. So I agree
Seriously
with Jake about the. Agreed, and it's fun. It's more fun to be disturbed. At least for me, it is. I would say
Join the dark side.
definitely.
Cookies.
There's a frog in the pot of slowly boiling water, especially around men and the need to be seen specifically. So all humans have this core need to be seen and acknowledged. And I believe that one thing that has happened insidiously and progressively in the worst possible way in the last 30 years in this country is men are no longer allowed to be seen specifically. There's only bad examples of this, such as Andrew Tate and Donald Trump and all this bullshit, but there are no good examples of this, right? Like, men are not allowed to be proud of being seen. They're allowed to do a bunch of cool shit, but they're not allowed to get acknowledgement for it because that would be egotistical and that would be bad. How dare you have an ego? How dare you take credit for the cool things that you're doing to make the world a better place or to make your community or your relationship or your life or your body, right? Whatever it is. And I think that has become, they talk about toxic masculinity and all that crap. And I think one of the drastic, serious consequences of the nonsensical narrative around toxic masculinity is that frog in the pot thing, which is we have eroded the idea that men deserve like exhibitionistic self-praise as much as women do. Like, it's okay if women are thoughts on Instagram or whatever, but if men do it, there's something pathological with you. But we also need validation. We
Well,
need to be seen and understood.
text chats, right? I made this point in private because to make it in public it's not possible, I don't think, without risking my license. So I'll make it in public here where I can articulate my thoughts. But the text chat of the guys that are involved, I don't really care what their ages are. It's part of natural development and core bonding. And anyone who says, I've never done that, how dare you, has simply not acknowledged his or her shadow. You just haven't. You have. Every single one. Now, you may not have used those words. You may not have used those references, but you have absolutely, in private, denigrated somebody else. You've used abusive sounding language. You've used
Oh, yeah.
socially unacceptable phraseology, right? Every single person at some point or another in his or her life and development has done that. Now, this one just happened to be leaked because somebody had something to gain. But I made this point, like I retweeted somebody that said, let she who's without sin cast the first judgment. Like, check your own text messages there. Like,
Yeah.
that also is a big part of our deep unconscious, that it's like, oh man, we're just going to jump out and shame these guys for doing this thing. Toxic masculinity, and how dare they try to run the country when they can't even keep their own language straight in their own text chats. Like, why don't you hand over your phone? Hand over your phone. I want to see what your DMs look like.
Yep.
Well, to Dr. Lockwood's point, I've been married for 20 years, and I'm happy that I'm married 20 years because I'm now a marriage and family therapist, and I think it is beneficial to be able to maintain a relationship. However, the studies apparently that showed that couples that post pictures of each other and talk about each other on social media tend to be weaker and fall apart, and there's something wrong.
I saw that. Where did you see that? Do you remember?
Many times over the years, and I actually think that's propaganda. I think it's bullshit, because on the one hand, like the good doctor said, on the one hand, the only ones that can show themselves are the bad behaved ones. And if you show what a healthy thing looks like, how dare you? It's actually broken, actually, or you're an egotistical turd, right? And so it's like, okay, if we're not supposed to talk about how to do it right, then the only thing that's going to be shown is how to do it wrong. That's not acceptable.
Oh,
And yet, good.
No, you go ahead. I'll wait.
No, somehow you lose credibility by being good at it, like at things.
Yeah, it's poking at the shadow. You're exposing blind spots of people they don't want to look at in themselves.
This is exactly why, or this is one of the big reasons why, in my opinion, this might seem peripheral, but I think it's central. One of the reasons why so many young men actually liked real Jordan Peterson is because actual Jordan Peterson,
not
because not Timo Peterson, they actually liked. I like Timo Peterson better personally, but that's just me. I have a preference.
That's only because you've known him and met him.
But still, he's a better guy, I think. Anyways, I would say he's more honest. I would say the reason so many people actually like Jordan Peterson is because he's very explicit about what he does right in his relationship. And he's honest about it. He's not grandiose about it. He's clear about it. He's consistent about it. He talks about his wife in crystal clear terms. He talks about what works in their relationship. And young men are starving for direct feedback about how to be a good boyfriend or husband or whatever. And that's a huge thing because most men have no role models. Like, I had my dad who's still married and he's a good guy, and I'm lucky that is not the norm. That is not the norm.
We're coming up over an hour and a half now. So I'm thinking one last question. I think a good one to end on would be, like, we talk about negative versions of masculinity. We talk about the Andrew Tates of the world, the chest-thumping narcissist. We talk about the emasculated man who, kind of surrenders his masculinity. What is your idea of a healthy version of masculinity? What does a good, healthy, masculine man look like?
I'd like to start because something just popped in my head. I'm not going to use men, actually. What I am going to reference Christian Conte. Christian Conte drinking game. So years ago, he had a podcast with Ray Lewis, the former football player. They call it Tackling Life. And one of the episodes is called Tackling the Alpha Male. And they cite a study, Christian cites a study that some researchers did on this pack of wolves in Yellowstone. And they followed these wolves around, and they found what was like the alpha of the alpha wolves. And this alpha wolf didn't go around tearing out other wolves' throats. What he did was he wrestled with his own wolf pups, taught him how to be a wolf, right? Essentially. And I think that is a perfect embodiment of what masculinity should be, is the strong and gentle, humble enough and with so much self-control that you can teach somebody else who is in need, a child, for example, how to be strong and gentle simultaneously without ripping their throat out. Because it's really easy for me to go like beat my kids up and throw them off the balcony or whatever. I would not. I would rather teach them that I have the power and how to control it properly, emotionally, psychologically, financially, verbally. Now, I'm not saying I get it right all the time, for sure. I mean, I yell at my kids more often than I'd like to. But if I can show my discretion and my power and how they're held in balance, I think that is how we train up the next generation to be good men, because it requires that restraint that we talked about. It also requires sometimes a demonstration of raw power. And sometimes that raw power comes in the form of building decks, right? It doesn't have to be violence. It has to be
Deck
something
picks.
producible, something that you can talk about that required effort. Also, reliance upon other people, because interdependence is also a very masculine trait. So I think if we look at other animals and how they conduct themselves, I think we could learn a lot from it.
Yeah, that was really good. I'll jump in there. I love that Jake's definition, and some of y'all probably heard. That's very aligned with Jordan Peterson's definition of meekness. I don't know if you've heard him talk about meekness before. And Matthew chapter 5, the meek shall inherit the earth is the and I haven't done the exegesis of the Greek word on this. I intend to at some point. I think that's potentially really powerful. But the idea is it's restrained power. Restrained power. And he's said often, many times, be a monster and then learn to control that. Because otherwise there's no moral virtue in avoiding conflict and refusing conflict, let's say, because I just did a Jordan Peterson word thing, by the way. That's funny. It's not moral to stay out of conflict unless there's some kind of risk of safety there, that if I didn't contain myself, that something bad would happen. I think that's a very interesting construct. I like the construct. I'm still thinking on the construct. I'm gonna say something in addition to Ryan's question. And I've really struggled with the question about like we need more tactics to kind of help reclaim masculinity in therapy. And I've raised this question to on the episode that I was on with Katie Kernodle, like what are our tactics to kind of reclaim culture? And my takeaway from this podcast is reclaiming the concept of objective reality. The existence of objective reality is an important battlefront, and I think we need to spend time focusing on that. And so part of that is like just acknowledging that males and females are dimorphic. And if we're biologically dimorphic, why wouldn't we not be dimorphic in role? Why would we not be dimorphic in emotional functioning at times? And we know the pursuer-distancer pattern exists. There you go. There's your plug. Your one plug for this podcast. And that's partially a function of role differences when you're talking about male and female relationships, and some of those realities of personality functioning that we were talking about earlier. So I think to be a man who's helping to reclaim a healthier profession is to fight for the concept of the existence of objective reality.
Dr. Lockwood, I want to give you the last word because you have good things to say. With the male-female relationships I work with that are high conflict, I always give the men this Jung quote of walk your path or be dragged. And I like to talk to these couples about the intrinsic energy of the masculine versus the feminine, not necessarily the male versus the female, but masculine, feminine is containment versus energetic, sacred garden sort of thing. So where the feminine in the relationship starts freaking the hell out is when she realizes that she can't be contained by who she's with. And so it's important for the men to build their ability to resil. I don't think that's a word, but be resilient, to contain, and create a solid, safe, I hate to say a safe space, but a safe space where she can nurture and delve into her own creative energy and co-create with him. And so what a lot of men I've worked with haven't known is how to contain in a way that is righteous, that is not cruel, overbearing, top down, authoritarian, essentially. And so it's teaching them how to be vulnerable without being a boob baby, because a lot of the things that when these men go to these therapists that just make orgastic cat sounds,
Mm.
it ends up just being, well, cry more, sir. Um, that isn't how that works necessarily.
Mm.
You have to, as Jake said, not allow the shadow to govern you by knowing what it is and seeing what it is. Like I know very well what my desired vices are. I've met them, right? So now I channel them. And I think what masculinity is, it is, yes, fury and power under restraint, but also a desire and ability to contain, not just within your family, but within your street, within your community, hopefully within your profession, if you can.
Mm.
And what is containment? Truth, blah, blah, blah. Yes, Jonathan.
I just wanted to tie something you were saying together with our discussion about abuse and domestic violence earlier. I hear y'all are just smashing thoughts together in my head today in a really cool way. Physical abuse and relationships, male perpetrated against female, is maladaptive attempt at containment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Govern me harder, daddy.
Uh-huh. And then, so in the example I gave earlier, when the female she gets with a good guy, she's not receiving containment. And so she emotionally escalates and it becomes maybe emotionally kind of aggressive at first and builds and builds and builds to a point, and she's still not getting containment. She's still not getting containment because this nice guy doesn't know how to deal with all that. And that's when that shift in the symptom bearer comes in. So that's it. That was a neat tie-in. I just want to
That's
throw
a
out
whole
there.
other hour, man. We could go on and
Yeah.
on, and we should, Ryan. Probably should.
There
Not tonight.
there is a there's a really interesting, and I'll throw another Jung word in, enantiodromic component there, where there's too much control, parabolically swinging to no control at all, no limitations, and there's that restraint issue. Like, you have to be able to restrain with proper dignity and respect other people's desires, right? I think we all do that. I mean, Heather just came and waved to you guys. Jonathan didn't see her because he was, mindfully looking off into the distance. But she helps restrain me. I help restrain her. We hold attention together, and without that, one or the other party could go very sideways very quickly.
Jake, what's the Jungian word for the feminine penis again?
Well, it was Swiss. It's Swiss. It's a Swiss term I can't think of. I'll get back to you.
Anyway.
Anima phallus?
Oh my God.
Dr. Lockwood.
Phalimus? I don't know.
It's ma'am.
How do you follow that?
I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss for words, which is impressive, I would say, because generally speaking,
you like to talk 18 hours a day in front of people?
I love to talk and just listen to me. So, no, I'm kidding. This has been lovely, by the way. Thank you all for joking around, and thank you, Ryan, by the way. Really grateful. I think I like what's been said. I don't have any disagreement fundamentally or even superficially with what's been said. I think I like the opposite framing usually, which is like minimum necessary force. I don't really care too much about constraint as a person. Maybe that's my problem, but I just can't see a world where I should care about constraints. I should be thinking, how much force can I get away with, is the thought process. And I'm thinking more about consequences than I'm thinking about constraints, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
I
Because
think, yeah, I agree with that real quick. I think there's some merit to that because you don't know where the limit is until you push it, right? Either it's
Right.
somebody or something or whatever.
correct,
The bank account evaporates. Like you have to try.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And so I think, uh, one positive version of masculinity that could be added to everything that's been said is men should be the chief scientists in their relationship because they're the ones who are testing and figuring out where limits could be across different values and goals. And so if you just kind of look at the symptoms of extra high testosterone, like not adaptive, but like the maladaptive version of extra high testosterone, it always relates to extra anxiety and insomnia and all these things. And so it's like there's an upper limit to how much you can get away with. And I think that is that limit finding, limit management experience, which I think is different than constraints, because constraints have more of a like a wisdom element. I don't think wisdom is gender specific, to be quite honest. I think plenty of wise women out there know how to issue and manage constraints in a relationship. I think finding the upper limits is more what I think of for men in particular. So
Mhm.
beyond just minimum necessary force, maximum risk tolerance.
I resonate with that really strongly as somebody who came from a anger over controlled stance to a healthy relationship with anger stance. That's exactly what I had to do developmentally.
I think if I could blend a couple things, Dr. Lockwood, I want to use the maximum amount of force in the correct direction. And I think, like adolescent Jake, you're talking about constraints. Like constraints are useful in channeling that force in the right direction. Jonathan, you talk about Matthew chapter 5. I'm trying to memorize the Beatitudes at the moment. I'm not there yet. But, controlled force, right? I referenced Psalm 119 earlier. Like the law gives me liberation, like direction and guidance give me liberation. And Jeremiah 29 verse 13 says, God says, you'll find me if you search with all your heart. So if I have a goal in life, I have a purpose, and I have like guardrails to give me the direction to pursue that purpose, go all out at that point. I think that's what makes sense to me.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else, guys?
Oh, a lot, but it's late.
You want to do this again in a month?
I do.
Perfect.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hey, let's make the next topic worried well.
Oh, I love that one. Dr. Lockwood would love that one. Yeah.
Perfection. Uncontroversial as usual.
As usual,
Uncontroversial
yeah.
as-